Hello, sewing friends. Woo-hoo! We are ready to have another great Serger session today. So welcome to my SMP Nation friends. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I see lots of you rolling in. Jeanette's here, Betsy's here, Esther's here, Jenny's here, Nancy's here, Sassy's here, Judith's here, Linda's here, Nancy, Debbie. Woohoo! So good to see you all. Wow. So, who was it that said, Diane, I think it was, said she is expecting to get her serger delivered from Sewing Machines Plus today. So, hey, thumbs up for you. Perfect timing. Yes, absolutely. So, let me tell you what we got on tap for today. I hope to give you a batch load of inspiration that you can use when you are thinking about a serger, using a serger, getting that serger out of the box, whatever level, whatever stage you're in. Initially, when I started the series, I kind of didn't think it was going to be a series. I was just going to show you a few things, talk about a few things, but it is building and I am getting more and more questions all the time. So I want to be able to give you a lot of great nitty gritty details. So today we're taking a deep dive into which stitches, when, where, why, and how. So let me go ahead and show you the first screen there, which is actually going to tell you a little bit about what I consider basic serger stitches. So I don't know if I got my first slide up there with the images of, there we go. So standard stitches on a 2, 3, or 4 thread serger. So you all know that I have been using the Brother Airflow 3000, available, of course, from your friends, my friends, at SewingMachinesPlus.com. They have not only that serger readily available for you, they have it for a tremendous price. So delivered right to your door, and then you can watch these videos as we go along and learn as you watch, because you're going to get a lot of in-depth details as we go along. Like I said, we're going to continue this series. And today, what we want to do is take a deep dive into kind of what we start with, the basics. We're going to go a little bit beyond that, but let's start with the basics. So what does it mean when we call a serger a standard serger? Well, a standard serger in my world means that it does basic stitches. Now, don't get too hung up on that word basic, because basic can take you to the beyond as well, and where you're going to use a whole lot of decorative capabilities and really what we might call specialty stitches, done though with those standard serger stitches. So when we have a standard serger, we have a serger that does a 2-thread stitch, a 3-thread stitch, or a 4-thread stitch. So we're not talking cover hem here. We're not talking chain stitch. We're not talking any of those types of things that really are considered a top stitch. We're talking about serger stitches. Now, those of you that have had a serger for a while, I had my very first one when I was about 18 years old, and they weren't even readily available. So I've seen a lot come along in sergers, and today we have so many different options. They've become much easier to use. And of course, the airflow shines when it comes to threading, because the threading is so simple. You've seen me do that on some past shows, and we will do it on some future shows as well. But let's just take kind of an overview today. I got lots of sample images to show you, and some accessories to tie in as well. So let's get started. 4-thread. What is a 4-thread? Well, we're calling it an overlock. And Anne, yes, great question. The 1800 does have the same features. The difference between the Airflow 1800 and the Airflow 3000 is a little bit of price and some accessory options. So you owe it to yourself to check out both on SewingMachinesPlus.com. You'll find not a whole lot of price difference. So if that little bit of jumping up is okay with you and okay with your budget, I would definitely recommend going up to the 3000. But you can always add the extra accessories that are available as an option. It's just that you end up getting a better price when you get it all together as a bundle, basically, rather than separately. But other than that, yes, same features, same great benefits to both sergers. So 4-thread, we're calling an overlock. And I'm just showing you pictures right now, but you're going to see actual stitch samples in just a little bit. So it's called an overlock because it is overlocking the raw edge, and it's literally interlocking the upper looper and the lower looper right along the raw edge of the fabric, which allows it to seal that raw edge like nothing else can. Many of us have used overcasting stitches on the sewing machine. And yes, there are some that mimic a serger or mimic an overlock, but there's absolutely nothing that is identical to a serger stitch unless it's done on a serger. And Debbie, you said you love your air threader. I'm so glad to hear that. Nita says air threader is a game changer for sure. And Leslie says, very nice serger. Yes, it is a very nice serger. One of the things I love so much about the Brother Airflow 3000 is its ease of use, full featured options, and the pricing. I mean, you know, a lot of times it does come down to what is this going to cost me? And I think this is the serger that has the most value of any other serger out there. And believe me, I have researched this really thoroughly. So a lot of bang for the buck. Absolutely. So you can see there that with a 4-thread overlock, it's not only locking over the raw edge, it's also stitching a secure, what we would call safety stitch seam along the needle line. Okay. So now let's switch over to the 3-thread overlock. And you can see on the 3-thread overlock, it is also overlocking the raw edge, sealing that raw edge, keeping it from raveling, compressing all the layers, and just making the seam look like it came from ready to wear. It's the other, you know, thing that we love so much about a serger compared to a sewing machine mock stitch is that the serger absolutely is identical to the stitches you find in ready to wear. So, you know, you're getting the most professional finish you could possibly have. Now, I don't know how many of you have friends that want to look at the inside of your clothes, but I get that all the time. People will pick up my hem and, you know, just turn it inside out and look and see what I did, or pull me at the neckline. And I'm happy with that because I try to finish my seams on the inside so that they are nice and neat. And I can do that with my Airflow 3000 for sure. So then we look at that 3-thread overlock, and it also is locking at the needle line. The difference is there's only one needle working. So with a 3-thread, we use one needle either on the far left or on the right. With a 4-thread, we use both needles, the left needle and the right needle. So that second needle line in a 4-thread as compared to the 3-thread gives it a little bit more security. So that's why it's called a safety stitch. If for some reason that needle thread broke or popped on the 3-thread, it could expose the seam tube being open, whereas it'd be very unlikely for both needles to pop on that 4-thread and split the seam open. So 3-thread overlock, you'll see a little bit more when I show you some actual stitch samples and the samples here, when and why and how I would use that. Then another very basic, very beautiful stitch that the serger does is the 3-thread rolled hem. Yes, we can also do a 2-thread rolled hem. In fact, we can do a 2-thread overcast. We can do a two-thread flat lock. I didn't put any of those extra things on here because I am going to devote a whole show on 2-thread stitching. I love the 2-thread stitch, and it is probably one of the least often used, if that makes any sense to you, meaning people have it on their machine, they've got it on their Brother Airflow, and they're like, wow, do I use this one and why? So we're going to devote a whole show to that. But a 3-thread rolled hem, I have often said, and I really pretty much feel this way, even if you didn't use any other stitch on your serger, the price you paid for it is worth the price of admission just to have a 3-thread rolled hem. Again, when we compare to ready to wear, there is nothing better than being able to match exactly what we see in ready to wear. And the 3-thread rolled hem, there is no way to mimic it on a sewing machine. There's just no way to really make it look like it looks when it comes from the serger. And Dorothy, you'd like to learn what stitch to use for what application. You are going to learn a bunch of that today. Got some great samples to show you in really nice images. So 2-thread overcast, I wanted to just, throw that one out there. And like I said, we're going to do a whole show on that. But it is, if you look at it, it is not called an overlock. And why is that? Because it is not locking at the needle line. So it is really very specifically an overcasting stitch. It's casting over the raw edge, and it does seal the raw edge, and the looper locks with the needle at the raw edge, but the needle is not locked on the seam line. So this is something that's just used for overcasting, not for actually creating a seam like you would for a 4-thread or a 3-thread. Then there's the 3-thread flat lock. There's also a capability for 2-thread, which you will see when I do the 2-thread. But I just wanted to throw that one out there because that's another stitch that is very commonly sought after on a serger. And it's really just a manipulation of a 3-thread stitch. Yeah, serging is not just for clothes, quilt for fun. You hit that right on target, and you're going to see that today in my images that are coming up in just a few seconds here. So I put the 3-thread flat lock up there because, again, it's something that a lot of people ask me about. Will this do a flat lock? And absolutely, I consider that a what we could call a standard stitch on the serger, although it's done more for decorative application if we're thinking about how we actually will use it. So again, we'll do a little bit more on that in the future, but for today, we just want to get kind of a really good overview, and I want to inspire you now with a whole bunch of images. So first thing I want you to notice real quick is in the lower corner on most of these, pretty much in that spot, you're going to see click here for project instructions. Okay, you can't click on the SMP live show. So what that means is after the show is over, I will be posting this on my website, letsgosew.com. And when you go right to the homepage, you'll see a link where you can download this entire presentation in the images that I'm showing and all the slides as a PDF so that you can reference all of this. Every single time you see click here for project instructions, it means that there is a complete project that is associated with this. I'd love to be able to show you how I made each one of these from start to finish, but this 1-hour show would turn into a probably a month long if we did that. So certainly feel free to email me with any specific questions once you get a chance to go through that. You can always send me email at letsgosew.com. But some of these projects were posted previously on the Brother Stitching social site, so they're archived there. Some of them are archived in my YouTube channel or on my website. So lots and lots and lots of resources. When I throw out all these goodies, I want you to be able to have something you can go back to and study a little bit more. I know study, that sounds like such a dry word, but really when it comes to sewing and serging and machine embroidery, all of those things, if we don't have backup instructions that we can refer to, a lot of this just floats off into the air and makes a nice video, but I like to provide you with backup material so that you can go back and view this in written terms and see the steps literally laid out in pictures as I went along and stitched these. So back to this particular project. This is a beautiful lace camisole, tank top, whatever you want to call it. And the fun thing about this is that it was totally serged as far as all of the seams. Now, I used a 4-thread overlock because I'm using woven fabric that's actually layered with a very lightweight lace. When it comes time to finish the neckline and the hem, I am going to switch over to my sewing machine. So you're going to see a variety of things here today where we finish up basically with our sewing machine, but we get all the heavy duty work done with our serger, and that means it's done neatly, professionally, thoroughly finished edges, and it's done at a very quick speed because sergers sew, if I remember right, about twice as fast as a regular sewing machine. Now, you don't have to sew that fast, but when you have the need for speed, a serger will give that to you. So that is going to make a big difference. Star, I appreciate you appreciating. Yes, backup materials is a perfect way to say it. Star says she appreciates the backup materials after the demos. For me, I know you might laugh at this, but there are times when I go to make something that I've already made, that I've already turned into a tutorial. I've already done a video. I've already done written instructions. And guess what? I have to go back and look at my own instructions to see what the steps were. So that if I can help you with that, I know what it's like for sure. Okay, so why did I use this? I used it because it's going to give me a secure seam. No, I would not have used gray thread on that white top. That is only done for example purposes. When I made my actual tank top, I did use white thread, but you would not be able to see it at all. The other great benefit for this is when I made this tank top, I will give you just a little bit of background. I made it once just what we would consider the normal standard way using my sewing machine, and I fitted it. So I did all my adjustments, and once I did that, which I really didn't have very many, but sometimes I have to adjust the shoulders a little bit to take them up a little bit so I don't have a gaposis in my neckline. So I did a trial garment. We call that a muslin. Some people call it a toile. It's just a test. It's a test garment. And once I fitted that one that came with 5/8 inch seam allowance, I then trimmed all of my seam allowance down to 1/4 of an inch. So when I got over to the serger, I could very speedily stitch those seams by just skimming the edge. What you want to keep in mind is that a serger does almost a perfect 1/4 inch seam, whether you're using a 3-thread or a 4-thread, as long as you're using your left needle, you're getting very close to 1/4 of an inch. Now, you'll see I've done some quilting projects on this. Just keep in mind my quilting friends that are doing precise patchwork, that's another whole ball game. We're not talking about precision patchwork 1/4 of an inch seams. We're talking about close to and good enough. Okay. Yeah. Teresa says seeing a visual demo is better than trying to figure it out on paper. So it's great to have both. Definitely. If we can have a video and written instructions, or at least the images that show the steps, I think that's helpful. Yes, Diana, good to know about trimming down the seam. You're going to see in another example that sometimes I actually will cut as I'm stitching. But in this case, once I fitted it, trimmed all the seam allowances down to 1/4 of an inch. I like to transfer a pattern like that to pattern tracing cloth. So just it looks kind of like interfacing, like a lightweight interfacing without any fusible on it, of course. And that makes a sturdy pattern that I can use over and over and over again, because I like to sew the basics over and over again. I'm kind of a pattern freak. Yes, I buy probably too many of them, but I don't know about you. Let me know in the chat. Do you buy patterns, but then keep reaching for your tried and true. I do that a lot. I reach for the tried and true. All right, so next up, oh, one more thing on that one. The other thing that makes the serger so great for a project like this is that lace, generally speaking, is a very loosely woven. Yep, thanks, Star Raymond. I do appreciate your comment, seeing the visual and the written. But lace is very loose, and having the serger for the seams locks everything together. So there's no chance of that pulling out or pulling away because it's such a secure seam. So that's the 4-thread overlock for that one. Hopefully that gives you a good example. All right, quilting. How many quilters do I have here? Quilting on the serger is such a blast. It is so quick, and so much fun, especially when you do a quilt as you go uh, project. And watch for me to do a whole quilt as you go project in the future. But for now, there are project instructions if you want to review this a little bit. In this particular type, yep, I got some quilters here. Dorothy's a quilter. Yep, getting some quilters here. I love to dabble in quilting, although I don't categorize myself or pigeonhole myself as a quote unquote quilter, because I like to do a little bit of a lot of things. But when it comes to quilting as you go, quilt as you go very often, and there's different ways to define it, but it's very often means that you're piecing and quilting all at the same time. So with the serger, I can actually layer everything together, batting, backing, and my top fabric, and then serge the seam, and literally everything is done all at once. I don't have to do anything else other than finish it. So what do you see on the right hand side there? You see my finished placemat. It's great for things that don't have to be a precise size. You can cut all your strips and stitch all your strips and make them a little bit oversized, then trim everything down so it's a perfect even rectangle. Head over to your sewing machine and put the binding on. Are there ways to bind with a serger? Absolutely. There's a way. Well, one of my favorite sayings, where there's a will, there's a way. There's a way to do a whole lot of things on a serger that we would maybe need to normally do on our sewing machine. But I'm always going to ask myself, what's best, and probably what's the most streamlined effort. If I got to jump through a whole lot of hoops to get my serger to do something it really wasn't technically designed to be the best at, then I'm going to hop over to my sewing machine, because straight stitching on a sewing machine is one of the things the sewing machine does best. And so it's very easy to complete that on the sewing machine. Linda, yes, you've got it. Fusible thread in the lower looper could definitely be an option, and you're thinking along the right way. Again, there's so many ways you can use your serger. Yes, absolutely. So I'll show a sample of that in the future, because I have done that in multiple instances, used a fusible thread, but we'd go off into the weeds today if we did that one. So let's just go on with some of the nitty gritty, some of the basics. All right, so the next one, same type of project. And Susan says, you're also a quilter. You've been using it. Oh, wow. Good for you, Susan. Yeah, no need to worry about the bobbins. I'm assuming you're probably using a chain stitch, which is, like I said, another whole category of stitching on a machine that may or may not be called a serger, may be called a cover hem machine, and there are some combos as well. But I wanted you to see this one, just another option. What I did in this case is I used an embroidered block for my center, and then I did the quilt as you go technique with the strips on the side. This ends up being a very pretty table runner that, again, was finished on the sewing machine when I did the binding. For me, that's just it's just the quickest, easiest way. I could do it in my sleep. And I've always got my sewing machine by my side anyway, so it works. It absolutely works. The other beauty of using a 4-thread overlock for doing this type of piecing, especially when you're doing a quilt as you go, you're sandwiching your quilt batting in at the same time that you're sewing the seam of your strips. And the serger automatically compacts that extra fluffy layer that you have from the batting. So it compresses it and it just makes it a really nice finish when you do open that up and you are pressing it. It also makes it very, very, very durable and highly washable. Hey, I see April is here from Australia. April, so good to have you here. I always love seeing your name pop up from so far away. I think we had somebody else here. Maybe you comment again for me. You were from pretty far away. I love to see that. And we know it's a whole different time frame for you, and maybe sometimes even a different day. And Anne has fusible thread, but doesn't know what to do with it. All right, future show, Anne. Future show. Okay, so that's the beauty of the 4-thread overlock for piecing and patchwork and compressing that batting. All right, here we go again. I did another pieced patchwork project. Yeah, Esther from the Netherlands. Yes, Esther. That now you've jogged my memory. I'm so used to seeing you here, but I don't often connect you with where you're from. So great to have you here from so far away. So many friends. Belinda's here from Florida. Yvonne is here from California. I know Anne's from Virginia. You're here. You're here from here, there, and everywhere. And we all appreciate that so much. So in this particular case, once again, I did all of that piecing with my serger. You can accomplish a log cabin style piecing very, very easily. Again, doesn't have to be precise patchwork because the little tiny variation in the seam allowance, it's okay. Now, in this particular case, I did not quilt as I go. I did not quilt as I went. No, neither one of those sound good. But I just did the piecing on the serger. Then I layered it with fusible batting. I love fusible batting for a project like this. So that gave me then my quilted fluffy layer. And then I sewed the seam using my lining fabric or my backing entirely on the serger, left a little opening for turning, turn that right side out. And then, yes, we do have to close that opening somehow. So you could do that with a fusible webbing. You could do that with a sewing machine straight stitch. You could do that with hand sewing. You do have to leave that little bit of an opening. What I chose to do after I finished is I flipped back to the right side and I just top stitched all along the outside edge of the placemat. And then I top stitched everywhere where I had two pieces of patchwork joining together. And what that did, you don't see a picture of it because I don't have a picture of the back when it was finished. But if you saw the back when it was finished, you would just see those straight lines where I stitched, not actually in the ditch, I stitched next to the ditch. You could stitch in the ditch if you wanted to. And in the future, I hope to do some simple quilting projects with you. But when I stitch in the ditch on my sewing machine, I tend to go in the ditch and out of the ditch, and then back in the ditch and back out of the ditch. So I have some pretty good methods for stitching next to the ditch that make my top stitching look really easy and accurate. So again, watch for that in a future show. But by doing all that top stitching, it didn't strengthen anything. It just made that a little bit better when it came to washing. I literally have these placemats right now on my kitchen table, and we still eat at our kitchen table. I wonder how many of you still eat at your kitchen table, and that's kind of one of those things going by the wayside. But we do eat there. And so these get used and they get washed frequently. And when they're all top stitched together and you wash and dry them in the dryer, it keeps all of those layers secured so they don't tend to, float out from one another, and you have less wrinkles and all that. So they could just be popped right back on the table. So Diane says she has an AccuQuilt log cabin, hasn't thought of using it for the serger. Yeah, really, really, really simple to do that. And Annette, you're not seeing me right now because I'm talking in the background, but I'm here. You'll see me in a couple minutes. There I am. I'm here with you. Just wanted you to be able to see those pictures really big and bold and clear while we go through these. Okay, next one. We're on the 3-thread now. 3-thread wide balance stitch. Now, I have been asked, what is a balance stitch? You will see a balance stitch in just a few minutes here when I head over to my table and show you my actual stitch samples. But a balance stitch, you'll see, when I explain that to you, it means it looks good on both the top and the bottom side, and everything is where it should be. So why did I sew this knit dress with a 3-thread? Well, a 3-thread is a little bit more flexible than a 4-thread. So for a really stretchy fabric like this was a stretch velour. I just liked having the benefit of when I wear it and I move around with my arms, it'll have a really good amount of stretch. I certainly could have used a 4. That would have been just fine. Sometimes I will use a 3. And then, Lorraine, yes, I will be doing more Takeover Tuesdays. I'm scheduled for every single month, unless there's an exceptional event happening with Sewing Machines Plus. I'm scheduled for the 3rd Tuesday of the month. Same time, same place, same channel, same station, same SMP Nation. So watch for that. We've got lots and lots and lots of time we're going to be spending together, and lots of great sewing and embroidery and serging inspiration for you in the future. So stay tuned. Okay, so the thing that I was starting to say is that sometimes when I use the 3-thread because I want a little bit more flexibility, I may go ahead on my sewing machine and just reinforce high stress areas. Let's say I was making a pair of knit pajama pants, for example. I may want to reinforce, the J curve that we have in the seat, just to give it a little bit more security. I may want to reinforce underneath the arm area, so that if it's an active wear and I'm moving a lot, it's just going to give it a little more security. But otherwise, the 3-thread is going to give me a good locking stitch. And the other big benefit, kind of a simple one, but when we think about it, when we use a serger, we're always going to be using more than one thread. Unlike our sewing machine. On our sewing machine, we can buy a spool, we can wind as many bobbins as we need, and we can complete our entire project in all likelihood with one spool of thread. On the serger, we're always going to need more than one spool. In most cases, 3 or 4 in order to form the stitch. So isn't it great when we have options and we can drop down to using just 3 threads if it's appropriate, and not have to have 4 that match the fabric? Once again, you're not seeing matching there. Anytime you see that I'm not using matching thread, it's for one reason and one reason only, and that is so that you can see those stitches clearly. Tina says, can you make bags with a serger? Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's a great question, because what we do want to think about sometimes is bulk. And if we've got some extra bulk, we do have possibly more options on our sewing machine. So, you always want to get a good quality sewing machine first, and then add a serger as a companion machine. So think of the two as being very complementary to one another, but by no means identical in what they do. Let's see. Janice says, nice to hear you're here monthly. Great. And Belinda says, always learning here. Thank you. I love hearing your comments. And like I said, if sometimes answers like this, that I'm hopefully giving you answers and inspiration, create more questions. So please feel free to send me your questions because we can follow up on those in future shows. Okay, so that's just a beautiful way to quickly stitch something together. Everything is held together well. When we get really technical about knits, most knits don't ravel. Most. They might fuzz a little bit, but they don't ravel and fray like woven fabrics do. However, a serger, again, gives it that perfect, clean finish, compacts all those layers together. And in the scheme of things, when we're talking about care requirements for a garment, it makes it really easy to care for because most of the time, we don't even need to be concerned with pressing that seam to the right side or the wrong side. We're going to press as we stitch so that we, have everything laying flat and nice and smooth. But once that garment is washed, if it's a t-shirt or a sweatshirt or a knit dress or a garment that has those narrow serger seams, most of the time we don't bother with having to press them like we would on a garment with 5/8 seams that are pressed open. If those aren't pressed open every time, they could get a little bit floppy and a little bit bumpy. Okay. Sharon says she needs to use her serger more often. Yes, Sharon, you do, and I hope you will after going through a lot of these shows. Okay, so a question that comes up often, and I will be doing this in a future show on the machine. Again, today's kind of nitty-gritty overview: which stitch, when, where, why, and how. And when it comes to stitching seams, remember that when the blade skims the raw edge, you're getting almost 1/4 of an inch seam. What if you have 5/8 and you want to trim off that extra 3/8 as you stitch? Well, again, remember, first thing you need to think about is, how is this going to fit? If it's a close fitting garment, then you want to make sure that it fits before you trim off that excess. But a lot of garments that we make on the serger or other things that we make on the serger, we're not looking for precise fit. However, we might have 5/8 of an inch and we want to trim that excess off. So my go-to way of doing this is getting my stitch all set up and then measuring with a seam gauge from the needle on the far most side. If I'm using a left needle, I'm going to measure from that left needle. If it's 2 needles, I'm still going to measure from the left needle because that's where the seam is going to be stitched. And then I'm going to see, well, where would the raw edge of that fabric need to line up with the front of the serger, so that if I line up the raw edge with that position on the front of the serger, it will consistently trim off the excess that I would have from a 5/8 inch seam and stitch my 1/4 of an inch. Again, it's all a matter of how you adjust it. Your cutting width dial moves your blade further away from the needle or closer to the needle. And that is something that we do as an adjustment to keep everything balanced. But once you've got that all set up, then I just like to take a Post-it note, just a yellow Post-it note. You could use, low-tack tape, like the painter's tape, and put it right along the edge there. And then when I serge, I look at the raw edge and line it up with that 5/8 inch mark. Okay. And then as I go along, it's going to trim the excess and give me 1/4 inch. Linda, is there a trick to doing a rolled hem? There's a lot of tricks to doing a rolled hem, actually. We've covered a couple things in the past, and we will certainly do some in the future, but you'll see a little bit on settings today. Oh, and Janice says, thanks to me, she finally changed her serger needles. Yeah. Serger needles don't get changed maybe as often as a sewing machine, but they definitely should be. If you start, when do you change your needle? Well, my favorite saying is when in doubt, throw it out. If you are stitching on a knit fabric and it is poking a hole in your knit, you're long overdue for changing your needles. If you hear a popping sound when the needle goes in, it's time to change your needles. I have become very accustomed to literally running my fingernail over a needle, and if it doesn't feel smooth, I use my when in doubt, throw it out, and I get rid of that needle and start fresh. A good needle is worth its weight in gold. Okay, Anne listens to the sound. Yep, absolutely. You definitely can hear it sometimes when that needle is starting to get dull. Okay, so that's 5/8, and there you can see me actually doing it. So if you look closely, that raw edge, that was a previous model machine, but you look, the raw edge is lining up with my Post-it note after I did the little seam gauge trick, and I'm trimming off about 3/8 and stitching about 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm just circled that pin just to kind of remind you, and I'll be showing you a couple things in a minute here, as far as like tools and some things that I like to add on to my serger. And many of us have gotten accustomed to using little clips in place of pins, and clips have a really good place when it comes to the serger, because they're plastic, they're big, and they're not going to be very likely that you run into them. However, I still am a pinning person. I apologize for being a pinning person, but I'm used to pins. I've been using them all my sewing life. And for me, sometimes I really like pinning. If you pin, Catherine, I'll answer your question in just a second, so we'll leave it up there. If you do pin, just remember, pins and serger blades are mortal enemies. And if they clash, if they meet, you do not want to know what's going to happen. Okay. It's going to be ugly. So always make sure you get those pins out of the way before they come into close contact with the serger blade or where the serger stitch is forming. Okay. Pretty simple. Just get those pins out of the way. I tend to use large head pins when I do use them with a serger, because I'm going to be likely to see them and remove them. Okay, Catherine says, are there special needles to use in a serger, like embroidery needles, or do you use the needle for the type of fabric? Super great question. First thing you're going to do is look at your manual and see, what does your serger require? The vast amount of sergers use a universal needle that is a size 11 to a 14. Universal means it's a standard type of needle that's used in a sewing machine. And it also means that the tip is designed to go through a knit fabric without damaging it, and go through a woven fabric with the same amount of piercing power that it needs. So I personally use just a standard universal needle, size 11 to 14 on my serger for all of my projects. And I will show you an actual package of needles when we get over to the machine. Great question. And Teresa only uses clips when serging. Hey, that works. Absolutely works. The only reason I don't use clips sometimes, you know me, I like to tell you the whole story from beginning to end, the whys and the wherefores. The only reason I don't is that sometimes they weigh my fabric down, and I don't want my fabric to get distorted or stretched out of shape. So as long as the clips are not causing any issues like that, the clips are a great way to go. Okay. All right. So next up here, I've got just a couple more pictures to show you. 3-thread overlock I used to make a scarf out of a knit lace. It was actually knitted lace, very soft, made a great infinity scarf. But when I made this and I started stitching samples, I was like, why do I want to sew all my seams right sides together and turn it right side out if I don't have to? The serger stitch was so lacy looking that it blended perfectly with my lace fabric. All I needed to do was match the thread color. You could, of course, use a contrast, but I wanted it to match. So I matched the thread color with my lace and simply stitched all of my seams with wrong sides together. So my serger seam actually became part of the decorative feature. And Betsy, yeah, you say you pin parallel. Absolutely. I'm pretty much parallel pinned there, just at a slight, at a slight angle, because lace has more open areas and more closed areas. So that just helped me get that secured a little bit better. Okay, Linda says, can you use regular thread or does it have to be serger specific thread? I'm going to say yes, you can use regular thread, and I have something to show you on that for sure. And Teresa, you're thinking along the line of future show. Yes, we will be doing a flat lock, and a flat lock definitely has potential for putting two pieces of fabric together. Thank you, Bernadette, for the compliment. It's a fun scarf to wear. It's a really pretty color. I love that kind of salmon color, and I would wear more of it if I could find more fabric that color. Okay, another 3-thread. This time, 3-thread overlock, simply used as a decorative accent. It seals the fabric so well that I was able to serge finish a simple square of fabric, leave the tails because I thought the thread was pretty. It's just ordinary serger thread, but I thought the thread was pretty. I knotted it at the corners so it wouldn't ravel out. And then I went ahead and tied 2 of those together, added a little bell, and turned it into a really neat little napkin ring. So just another option of using a 3-thread overlock, this time not as a seam, but as an edge finish. Same thing here, 3-thread overlock as an edge finish. You heard me talk in a past show about using woolly type thread. We did a lot on different types of decorative and alternative threads. And the big advantage of a woolly thread is, number one, it's very soft. So if you're using it for something and you want the softest inside seam you could possibly have, the woolly type thread definitely gives a really soft finish. But its other advantage as a serger thread, particularly used on an edge, is that it allows you to get a little bit of a closer look to the stitches. So we don't have to set our stitch length quite so short. We can have a little bit of a longer stitch length, and when the thread fluffs out, it fills in and makes it look like we used a shorter stitch length when it's actually the fluffiness of the thread that's closing up those gaps. So that's the best way that I can think of it. And M. Yates says, what is woolly thread and where do you get it? I'm sure Sewing Machines Plus has options for woolly thread. Just look for serger thread options, and you'll find that woolly thread, it's sometimes called woolly nylon. It's sometimes called woolly poly. It has some different names. It's just, but it's all pretty much the same thing. Okay, next up, rolled hem. So I had a question earlier about a rolled hem. So the key with a rolled hem is setting it up according to your machine manual. And every machine is a little bit different, but in general, in most cases, what you do is you use the right needle on your serger. Left needle gets taken out. When you're not using a needle, always take it out. So if you're switching from 4 to 3 and you think you can just leave that unthreaded needle in there, I'm telling you, it's probably going to cause you more trouble than it's worth. So go ahead and remove that needle whenever you're not using it. Very easy to put back in, especially after I show you the tool that I use today. But for setting up for a rolled hem, you're going to use a shorter than average stitch length. you're going to use the left needle, you're going to use a tight lower looper tension, and that's going to make your stitch look as beautiful on the underside as it does on the top side. One of my tricks in the past that I showed you was actually using water-soluble stabilizer when you're working with a very fine, soft fabric like chiffon that is very easy for the threads to pull off or easy to pucker. So again, we'll probably do a whole show on rolled hem options all by itself, but that's just to give you a little bit of inspiration and a few tips today. All right, what else can you do with a rolled hem? Well, you can simply take a piece of ribbon and use a contrasting thread, stitch a rolled hem on there, and now you have a colorful accent on a piece of ribbon. Ruffles, it's one of my favorite ways to finish ruffles that are a single layer of fabric. No need to hem on your sewing machine, long and tedious. It's really quick and easy to use a rolled hem. And oh, by the way, gathering is also very easy on a serger as well. And we will talk more about that in the future for sure. Betsy says, is the water soluble ironed on? No, the water soluble is a water soluble wash away product. And Sewing Machines Plus has their own brand of Perfect Sew wash away stabilizer. That's what I use. I just simply cut it in strips. I layer it with the fabric. I stitch through it, and then I dip it in warm water, and it all goes away. So no need to fuse that. Anne serged a ruffle years ago and forgot how. Well, it's easy, and we'll be doing a whole thing on the accessory feet in the future as well. But that pillow that you see there, that was the ideal place to use this beautiful, beautiful ruffle finished on the serger and gathered on the serger as well. Yeah, Anne loves StayPerfect stabilizers. They have a great, great lineup. You definitely owe it to yourself to check Sewing Machines Plus for all of their products and their full line of stabilizers. All right, rolled hem. What else do we use a rolled hem for? Rolled hems have been used for decades now to finish the edges of napkins. And again, that is something that totally, completely matches what you would find in ready to wear. The 3-thread rolled hem is a beautiful finish. In this case, I used it for double layer napkins. One of my favorite things to do is to take a contrasting fabric, match it to an embroidery design that I've added. And again, full project instructions are available for this. And then when I serge finish that, it has a beautiful look on both sides. On the one side, I'm kind of focusing on the embroidery because the thread color is blending in for the rolled hem. But on the opposite side, which the napkin can be used reversibly, that same rolled hem stitch, because it looks good on the top and on the bottom, matches up really nicely. What you see me doing here is using one of my favorite little tricks for burying the thread tail. I'll tell you right off, if I got some experienced sergers here, I almost never try to turn a corner. Can it be done? Can I do it? Yes. Is it worth it? In most cases, I don't think so. I prefer instead to stitch from end to end and end to end, and then bury my thread tails instead of trying to turn that corner. And with a tapestry needle, I can thread that needle, pull about a 1-inch length of tail or ½ inch to an inch underneath the previous stitches, and everything is anchored perfectly. So let's see. I had a question. Deborah says, can you do a rolled hem with 4 needles? No, a rolled hem is always done with 1 needle. And just about every machine I've ever seen, it's done with the left needle only, but always 1 needle. Okay, so overlock and flat lock merge together on this project. We'll go through this one really quick. I do have full instructions on how to serge a t-shirt. I had a past Sewing Machines Plus event where I actually serged a t-shirt in 1 hour from start to finish. On this one, I did entirely use my serger for this by using a 3-thread overlock for the seam and a flat lock for the hems. Again, saving the flat lock for future, but at least you kind of have the process down here in very simple little terms. Kathleen wants to know, would you use stretch thread or sulky type of thread? Okay, so I have some threads over there, and I will show you that in just a minute. I think that'll answer that question. All right, so when we do a rolled hem, again, here's just like a recap of the settings. I realize you can't see those tension discs as well as you need to, but again, check the manual. The manual will give you guidelines in general, pretty much a balanced stitch on the needle and upper looper, but the lower looper gets tightened. So my needle is at 5, my needle is at 4. My left needle is not in there. My right needle is at 4. My upper looper is at 5, and my lower looper is on 7. And that's exactly the setting I used for the rolled hem that you see there. That was exactly done on that machine. Okay, left needle or right needle for narrow rolled hem. Bernadette, in 99% of the cases that everything I've seen uses the right needle, because that gives you the narrowest stitch. Linda, great question. Do you keep the knife in while doing the rolled hem? I almost always do, because, and it's a great question that you bring up, and it allows me to give you another one of my best tips, and that is you almost always get a better stitch quality when you're skimming the raw edge of the fabric or actually trimming it. So in the case of the rolled hem, I'm always trimming off a little bit, because that will allow the stitch to form perfectly from the needle to the raw edge. Okay, interesting search from hem to sleeve. Yeah, Diana, you can do it the opposite. And in fact, you can do one side one way and one side the other way. It's just usually the hem area is a little bit wider and a little bit easier to kind of keep everything connected together for starting. Okay, so there I'm just showing you a little glimpse, kind of a sneak preview of using a foot. We're going to talk more about feet in the future, and using the flat lock stitch to actually sew that hem so that when we open it up, you see on the top left, that's what the right side looks like. On the bottom, you see what the wrong side looks like, and that's how that t-shirt was hemmed, although it was done obviously with matching thread. Okay, we're going to switch real quick over to the machine and take just a few more minutes so that I can show you some great things that I have over on my table. All right, so you see my big, beautiful airflow serger from Sewing Machines Plus is where you can get this. One of my options I want to show you today for accessories is the extension table. So this is not generally packed with it. It is available as an accessory. And you can see when that's snugged up, by the way, it folds flat, makes easy storage. It gives you an extended bed. So ideal for those quilting projects, ideal for those garment projects where instead of just having that narrow little space there, you have full support from that extension table. I'm a big fan of extension tables for everything and everywhere I could possibly have it. All right, I'm going to tilt my camera down. And if you do have some questions while I'm showing you this for a few minutes, please hold them so that I can answer them when I have a little bit better view. I'm a little bit out of view right now. All right, so real quick, I want to go through and just show you the actual stitch samples that I was talking about. So there's the 4-thread seam. This is a balanced stitch. When the stitch is balanced, the needles look like straight stitches like you would expect on a sewing machine. The upper looper stretches from the needle line to the raw edge and perfectly locks at the raw edge. On the wrong side, the left needle will look like a tiny dot. You can't see it, but there's a tiny dot there. The right needle will also look like a tiny dot. The lower looper then will stretch from the seam line to the raw edge. It will lock at the seam line and it will lock at the raw edge. So if we flip this back up again, you see this is what it looks like from the right side. For this sample, I threaded my machine. Let me know if you can see that good. Just give me a thumbs up. I think you can see that good from what I'm looking at. This would be the top side. This would be the bottom side. So this is the side facing up. This is the side facing down. That's what a balanced stitch looks like. I will tell you that on my airflow serger, to get a balanced stitch, I'm almost always at a setting of 4, 4, 4, 4 on every tension dial. Yes, we have the ability to tweak the attention, to tweak the tension, to give the tension some attention by tweaking it. But yes, we also have such consistent quality tension that there is very little tweaking that ever needs to be done, even when we switch from fabric to fabric. Thank you, Jackie, for the thumbs up. So I know you can see that well. So that's what a balanced 4-thread looks like. This is what a balanced 3-thread looks like. And if we compare these two together, again, the only difference here is that we only have one needle. So we only have one needle line showing here, and we only have one dot that you can't see here because the dots would have to be magnified. Balanced 3-thread stitch. So we don't have that second needle. When you saw some of my samples that I showed you in those images, and I used the 3-thread for a decorative effect, the reason that it gives us a better, prettier decorative effect is because we don't have that second line of top stitching. Like if I'm going to use this for decorative, would I want another needle line showing? No. Do I need another needle line showing? No, because I'm not doing this for a secure seam. I'm doing it for good looks. Okay. All right. Here's an example of a knit fabric stitched with a 3-thread and a 4-thread. So if I was really stretching this, I would find I could stretch that 3-thread a little bit more because it's not being held back by that extra needle line, but I still have a lot of stretch capability with that 4. So when it comes to serging knit seams, go with whatever you prefer. If you want to have that little bit of extra reinforcement, go ahead and use all 4 threads. It's going to be a nice secure seam whether you use 4 or 3, but the 4 gives you that extra little bit of security. All right, 2-thread. What's a 2-thread look like? Well, we're going to do future. Next show is going to be 2-thread because I got a lot of great things I can show you with the 2-thread. But in its most basic form, the needle and the lower looper are the only 2 threads that are threaded on the machine. So on the top side, the needle and the lower looper lock together at the what would normally be the seam line, although it's not sewing a seam, and lock at the raw edge. When we flip it over, you can see how it's not locking at the seam line. So if I were to pull on this piece and try to open it up, it would split open very readily because it is not locking, even though it looks like it is on the top side. On the bottom side, it is not locking. So again, top side, bottom side, the fact that it does not lock gives us opportunities to do some creative things with it. However, the option for stitching with only 2 threads as an overcasting where we don't need it to stitch the seam has great benefit. I only need 2 cones of thread that match my fabric in a case like this, 2 spools of thread. And I can then sew that with my regular sewing machine. So great, great benefit. Here's a little image of a little sample of the rolled hem. And what I did on this one to show you a little bit of difference is this one right here by my thumb is done with regular, ordinary, standard serger thread. So from my perspective, Sewing Machines Plus sells a variety of serger threads, MaxiLock being the basic serger thread, and that's the one that I reach for over and over again. The quality is fantastic. All serger thread, remember, is a little bit lighter in weight, and those big cones are going to take you a long ways. So that's done with regular serger thread. This edge is done with the woolly thread, and the woolly thread, not the same color, obviously, but this is the woolly thread. So I'm going to stretch it, and you're going to see it gets a little bit thinner when it's stretched, but when it's relaxed, then it fluffs out. So what this sample shows you is I can use the exact same stitch length, but if I switch to woolly thread, it looks like I used a shorter stitch length, and it fills in just a little bit better. Deborah, I can see your question is serger thread, cotton or polyester? Serger thread is polyester because it's very, very strong, and because it is thinner, it needs to be strong, and the serger needs that extra strength to handle the speed of the stitches, and we want that thinner strand because we don't want to build a big buildup of stitches on our fabric. Remember, we're sewing with at least 2, 3, or 4 threads, and that's going to make everything feel a little bit thicker. So there's the rolled hem. Got a couple more to show you here real quick. That is an example of a flat lock, which we'll be doing in the future. Just wanted to give you a peek at it. Flat lock can be used for decorative effects. It has 2 sides, a loopy side and what's called a ladder side. And both of those can be used for some fun techniques. We talked about gathering just briefly there. Gathering can be done really full or not quite so full. And again, future show, we'll be doing gathering and we'll be doing accessory feet. So lots and lots and lots more to come. All right, let's talk about thread for just a minute here. Can you use ordinary sewing thread on your serger? You absolutely can. Just remember a couple things. First of all, when you use ordinary serger thread, they give you a little, what I like to call a wagon wheel. And that little wagon wheel helps the thread spin off so that it doesn't catch on the spool cap. So you always want that nice and tight down on the spool cap. Just helps that reel off a little bit easier. If your cap is already perfectly smooth, you can skip that little wagon wheel. But why do we not use ordinary sewing thread in the serger all the time? One big reason, this thread and this thread have totally different mileage. This goes many, many miles. This goes only a few miles. When you're desperate, can you use it? Absolutely. But also remember, and you're not going to be able to see it on camera, but this thread, my pink thread, is thicker than my gray thread. And it's going to build up a little bit more bulk. So just keep that in mind, but it is a possibility. You know what else is a possibility for standard serger edge finishing or overlocking when we're sewing the regular seam on our sewing machine? Believe it or not, embroidery thread. There have been times, like in this particular case, I've got a very slinky, slippery satin, very thin, and embroidery thread is probably the thinnest thread of all of these, and it will provide a really nice soft finish. So why wouldn't we use embroidery thread all the time? 2 reasons. Number one, it is definitely more costly than standard serger thread, and if we can use serger thread, fine. But maybe you don't have the right color, or maybe you do want that slightly thinner thread on your fabric, then embroidery thread is an option. Just remember, one thing very important to remember, this thread is a little bit more delicate. So if this got snagged or pulled, it doesn't have the holding power that regular serger thread does. So in most cases, this is going to be the winner. This is going to be the winner thread. Okay, let me go through just a couple quick accessories for you. One thing I highly recommend that you do a little search for is an extra pair of tweezers. Most sergers come with tweezers that are okay. and I use that word very specifically. They're okay, but they're just okay. If you can upgrade yourself to a very fine point pair of tweezers, here's two that I have in my repertoire. Um, they grip the thread better, and when you need a good grip, a pointier point does a better job than this does. So I like to add that on. Here's our clips that we talked about, where if we were serging a seam, we would simply clip all of our layers together and avoid using pins. Those clips come off really easy, but you do see how clips add a little bit of weight. So sometimes that's going to distort just a little bit. Needles. We talked about needles. This is my standard needle. So my serger book actually says I need the 130/705H system. Sounds like a big fancy long term. All it really means is these are standard, ordinary, universal type needles. So you can use different brands. Schmetz are great. Or you can get other brands. They are all the same if it's the same system number. And again, use anything from a size 11, 12. This packet has 12, so 11, 12, or 14. 12 is a really good medium range size. It's a little stronger than 11, but not quite as thick as a 14. All right, when it comes to needles, this is going to be something that I suggest you search for in the notions department. And yes, Sewing Machines Plus does have some options for this. This is a needle inserter tool. This makes inserting the needle up into that hole a breeze. The needle simply drops into a little holding hole, and then it allows you, remember I got a camera in between me, get that in there. It allows you to simply slip that needle up into the machine. I will show you this next time when we're actually stitching on the machine, and makes a big, big difference. Just truth be told, if you were with me last time and I had some issues getting the needle in, it's because I was so far away I couldn't see what I was doing. And if I would have had this tool handy, it would have made it a breeze. So this is a great, great option to have. Definitely, you're going to want to have some options for cleaning. We talked about that a little bit, I think, last time or the time before. And what about feet? Well, the Airflow 3000, one of the big, big goodies in the package is this full set of feet. A foot that will allow us to do gathering and sewing the seam all in one step. A foot that will allow us to actually create piping and sew a seam with piping sandwiched in between, or make our own piping fast and easy on the serger. And then a blind hem foot that can be used for all kinds of options. And I will be using this in my next show when we do the 2-thread stitches. All right, I'm going to come back over and see if I have any more questions before we wrap up today. Hopefully you learned some new things. Let me know if you learned some new things. Let me know if you were inspired to use your serger more, and if you're looking forward to our future shows, because I know I sure am looking forward to it. All right, let's see. Questions, comments, and questions. Got a few minutes here, and then we will wrap up. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching live. Thank you for watching on the replay, if you're watching replay. And thank you for staying an extra few minutes. There's always so much more to tell. All right, let's see. M. Yates says she has indeed learned some new things. Sharon said, yes, great info. Lisa, thank you for your compliment. Jackie, thank you so much. Good. I love helping you make the most of your machines. That is my mission. That is my goal. All right, let's see. Lorraine, yes, absolutely. All of these stitches are common to any serger that does basic stitches. So absolutely, you can use this to apply to yours. Let's see. I had a question from Diana. Do you prefer doing piping on a serger or a sewing machine? Diana, that's a $6 million question. And the answer is, it all depends. I think you'll get a little bit clearer picture when I actually use that foot and show you how. But here's the big takeaway for today. And I like you to think about your takeaways. What are the things that kind of stood out the most for you? Obviously, we've got a whole bunch of resources you're going to find on letsgosew.com, right on that homepage that you can refer to. But one of the big takeaways is you remember that your serger gives you speed, your sewing machine gives you precision. So if what I'm doing can be done speedily and I don't need as much precision as my sewing machine offers, very often I can get that accomplished on my serger. Precision is a whole different ball game, and our sewing machine allows us to sew, pivots, corners, one stitch at a time, and do a lot more maneuvering because there is no blade in the way, and we're not limited to the edge. Even if we disengage our blade on the serger, we're still limited to stitching on an edge, where on the sewing machine we could stitch anywhere we want to. Any tricks to threading needles other than remove the foot? Removing the foot is not always necessary, Linda. It's a great question, but it just sure makes things easier. And I always put the needles in before I thread the machine, if you have the option, because then you don't have all the threads in the way that are tangling it up. But I have to tell you, a needle inserter tool is worth its weight in gold. This particular one actually has a little threading mechanism as well, but with the Brother Airflow sergers, they have automatic needle threaders, so I don't need to use this needle threader at all. I simply use the needle inserter portion. So with this, you literally, if this was the serger throat plate, you literally dip it down into the opening. You can see where my fingers are. That would be the opening. And then you simply raise it up until it goes right into the slot where the needle goes in. And remember, another tip that I've shared with you before, but always loosen that needle screw just slightly. Never over loosen it to the point where it could possibly fall out, because there's the area where the needle actually goes in is very shallow. So you really don't need to open it up very much, which means that screw only needs to be loosened a little bit for the needle to get in there. Yeah, Patty, this is fabulous, absolutely fabulous, and very, very readily available. Okay, let's see if I got any more questions before we wrap up and close this one out. All right, Donna says air threading is a must. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and have Sewing Machines Plus bring up the airflow picture there available from Sewing Machines Plus. It's a great, great, great machine. It's a great price. Those of you that know me and know me well know that I only promote what I really, really can stand behind myself. And I am pretty much an everyday stitcher. So the machines that I talk about, that I know, that I love, that I use, that I recommend, are based on real life use. And this one is a sweetheart of a serger, absolute sweetheart. So definitely check it out. Best value for the money, lots and lots of options, and we will be doing lots more with this serger in future shows. All right, I love you all. I'll say goodbye, and until I see you again, I wish you all a world full of pretty stitches. Bye-bye and happy stitching.